Welcome back, everybody. It's Arm Aquila, and this time I have a new but old guest, my friend Christine. Um, some of you may recognize her from the last two episodes of the Identity Panel. Um, she and I met in a work environment early 2023, so
Yeah.
probably the newest addition to the friend group. And today we are going to be talking about the Yale Integrity Project's critique of the Cass Review. If you're not familiar, the Cass Review was a literature review done by Dr. Hilary Cass of the United Kingdom National Health Service about gender affirming care for transgender youth. That's a mouthful.
It is.
Um, And we're going to take a look at this Yale critique from a public relations perspective. And we're going to insert some of our own commentary as people who may or may not be affected by some of the policies that are being based on this review. I apologize if you find me coughing. I did test positive for COVID-19. Yay. I'm feeling mostly pretty good, but I do have a little bit of a nagging cough. Um, about me, if you're new to this channel, I was a public affairs NCO for the United States Army from 2011 to 2017. Um, I got some experience in crisis communications after leaving the Army. I got a bachelor's degree in public relations from Kennesaw State University in Kennesaw, Georgia. And my stake in this is I'm a trans person. Some of these policies directly affect me. I'm going to do my absolute best to separate my professional opinion versus my personal opinion. And if you think that I've stepped over the line, please let me know in the comments. I do very much want you to be a check on my overreach. And without further ado, Christine.
Thanks, Akila. It's so great to be back. It is. I'm so glad that you've invited me back on. So a little bit about me. I have almost 20 years of experience in corporate communications and marketing communications and PR. I got my degree in public relations at the University of Tennessee. And since then, I have done communications for manufacturing, for retail, for like telecommunications, for more manufacturing. So I've seen a lot of different things about how organizations um, talk about their stance on bringing your authentic self. And I've seen it done well, and I've also seen it done like lip service. And for me, that's something that's really important. Like that's part of my stake is really seeing how um, organizations support gender affirming care. And as the mother to a child, it's important for me that healthcare professionals um, have a good basis in what all of that, like what the mental health implications are, what it can mean for a child. And also, I volunteer quite a bit in my community. So my volunteer work puts me in touch with a lot of other parents who might not have the same point of view. So that I can, having something like the Yale critique is really important because, when you have those conversations sometimes in the carpool line where people just say complete the complete wrong thing. It's good to be able to have something in your back pocket that you know is right.
Right. Wow, that's That's actually that's a pretty heavy stake in this conversation.
Just being a mom, being a
Well, I
mom in the
mean,
world.
you know, since I'm never gonna be a parent, I can only look at how my own mother reacted to being a parent. Um, to two very rambunctious boys, one of whom grew up to be not so much of a boy, um, but she treated parenting with this amazing gravitas. And you've heard me wax poetic about my feelings about her and how she raised me and my brother multiple times. And yeah, I mean, if somebody is trying to be a parent the right way and make good decisions, I can only imagine the terror and the stress with all of these competing interests saying you're doing it right, you're doing it wrong, and you're a horrible person if you blah 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 blah. And I have a tremendous amount of, you know, not necessarily sympathy because I've never walked in those shoes really, but I think about my mom and what she went through. Yeah. So we're going to start off with the conclusion, and I'm going to link to the review so you can, if you think I've represented the Yale review materially incorrectly, you can check my work. But I'm going to go ahead and read the conclusion of the Yale Critique. The CAS review was commissioned to address the failure of the UK National Health Service to provide timely, competent, and high-quality care to transgender youth. These failures include long wait times, often years, and resulting delays in timely treatment by skilled providers. Instead of effectively addressing the issue, however, the review's process and recommendations stake out an ideological position on care for transgender youth that is deeply at odds with the review's own findings about the importance of individualized and age-appropriate approach to medical treatments for gender dysphoria in youth, consistent with the international standards of care issued by the World Professional Association for Transgender Health and the clinical practice guidelines issued by the Endocrine Society. Far from evaluating the evidence in a neutral and scientifically valid manner, the review obscures key findings, misrepresents its own data, and is rife with misapplications of the scientific method. The review deeply considers the possibility of gender-affirming interventions being given to someone who is not transgender, but without reciprocal consideration for transgender youth who undergo permanent distressing physical changes when they do not receive timely care. The vast majority of transgender youth in the UK and beyond do not receive an opportunity to even consider clinical care with qualified clinicians, and the review's data demonstrate this clearly.
Reading this made me mad about the cash report. Like, because I downloaded the cash report too to look
Oh,
at it.
wow. Okay.
I won't say that I read it. It's like 400 pages.
Right.
And it's very, very well laid out. As a communications person, I can appreciate how pretty it was.
Okay. All right.
But like there's so much about so many studies don't get peer reviewed and then they get pulled as sound bites. And this is just another one. And I'm glad that Yale came through and did this due diligence.
Oh, Yale brought the A game. Um, it was done by 8 doctors and a lawyer. So
Gotta have the law.
you've got Meredith McNamara, medical doctor, assistant professor of pediatrics, Yale School of Medicine. Kellen Baker, PhD, MPH, or Masters in Public Health, if I'm not mistaken,
Mhm.
MA, Executive Director, Whitman Walker Institute. Not familiar with that one. Kara Connolly, Medical Doctor, MCR, Associate Professor of Pediatrics, Division of Endocrinology, School of Medicine, Oregon Health and Science University. Aaron Jansen, Medical Doctor, Associate Professor of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences, Northwestern University's Feinberg School of Medicine. Johanna Olson Kennedy, Medical Doctor, Professor of Clinical Pediatrics, Keck School of Medicine of University of Southern California. Ken C. Pang, letters that I don't even recognize. Leadership Fellow and Senior Principal Research Fellow, Murdoch Children's Research Institute, VIC, Australia.
Hmm.
Aidan Scheim, PhD, Assistant Professor of Epidemiology, Dornsiff School of Public Health, Drexel University. And Jack Turbin, Medical Doctor, MHS, Assistant Professor of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences and Affiliate Faculty at the Philip R. Lee Institute for Health Policy Studies, University of California, San Francisco. And Ann Alscott, Juris Doctorate, Professor of Law, Yale School of Law. Because this was published in the Yale Law Review.
Well, and that's already very well respected. And then you have all of these people with their great bona fides.
And I think that even with all of the bona fides that this dream team brings to the page, and they bring some serious credit. A total of 86 years of experience in caring for more than 4,800 transgender youth and have published 278 peer-reviewed studies, 168 of which are in the field of gender-affirming care. I think ultimately in the realm of public opinion, that's actually going to wind up working against them.
Tell me more.
Well, I was having a conversation with Leanna and some other people who are not party to this. You cannot give someone context that does not want it.
This is true.
You're never going to reach people like J.K. Rowling, who are essentially true believers in being gender critical. And I think that's a fundamental mistake that we keep missing, is that you can fact someone to death, but the only real way to move the needle is ultimately to tell a story.
This is true.
All right, what's your, I mean, what do you think? I mean, just after having read this 39-page document, I mean, what's going through your mind?
There is so much to pull from this. And I want to touch back on what you said about like you can't give people context if they don't want it. You can't like it's because I was trying to figure out exactly who this is for. I'm glad that it exists. I'm glad that someone is fact checking um this other document that is the cash report that's being pulled out and being pointed at as this great source for making, policy decisions. But I think its biggest use is for the judicial branch, really. It can be used as a source or something similar to say, you know what, there's precedent, we found this. So it is a good reference. But from a PR perspective, I think that there's a lot here that can further and advance the case for gender affirming care. It just needs to be packaged in the right way
Yeah.
because we can get people to read one page, much less 39.
Yeah, and this was I think you'll agree with me. This was extremely dense writing.
Yes, very much so.
Um, but one of the first things I highlighted in my PDF was the transparency and expertise of our group starkly contrasts with the review's authors. Most of the review's known contributors have neither research nor clinical experience in transgender healthcare. The review incorrectly assumes that clinicians who provide and conduct research in transgender health are biased. Expertise is not considered bias in any other realm of science or medicine, and it should not be here. It should not be here. Further, many of the review's authors' identities are unknown. I apologize. We lost Christine for a moment, but she's back. So when I look at that statement from, and so early on in the critique, I'm seeing ethical concerns with the cast review right off the bat. If you're not in something that momentous, complex, and important, if you're not willing to sign your name to it, that's really a red flag for me,
Oh yeah.
because what are you hiding?
Do you
Actually, let me
think,
go ahead.
I was gonna say, do you think that maybe they were worried about how it looked on them professionally, if they would lose credibility, lose patience, something? I would.
I you know my gut says fear of accountability,
Mm,
because shit like this always comes out, because there are organizations that can go in and check your homework, like Yale did.
I was gonna say if this was like the scientific version of being old tweeted.
This is the scientific equivalent of being bitch slapped.
I mean, that's fair. I mean, so what I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but what I want to know now is what happened to uh the author of Hillary Cass. I was like, what is her first name? Hillary Cass. What happened to Dr. Hillary Cass after this?
um I think she still works for the NHS. I haven't really checked up on her. Actually, let's do a quick Google search. um Let me pull up a an incognito window. Let's see. Dr. Hillary Cass. All right. What does Wikipedia have to say about her? Okay. Let's see. Hospital. They have an entry for the Cass review. Okay. In September 2020, Cass accepted an appointment to lead the independent Cass review for the NHS into gender identity services for children and young people. The interim report of the Cass was published in March 2022. It said that the rise in referrals had led to the staff being overwhelmed, and recommended the creation of a network of regional hubs to provide care and support to young people. The report noted that the clinical approach used by the Gender Identity Development Service, GIDS, has not been subjected to the same to some of the usual control measures typically applied with new treatments, and raised concerns about the lack of collection of data collection by GIDS. What is GIDS? Okay, the Gender Identity Development Service was nationally operated health clinic in the United Kingdom that specialized in working with children with gender identity issues, including gender dysphoria. The service closed on 28 March 2024 after serious concerns were repeatedly raised over a number of years by several independent NHS whistleblowers.
Hmm.
That may have to be its own video.
Right? The plot has thickened.
But yeah, well, there was a video by Abigail Thorne where she detailed her travails with the National Health Services, where she had to call someone more than 200 times uh, to get through to this person. And that's, I mean, if you're that overwhelmed, ask for more staff. I
Mm.
mean, if you're not asking for things that you need to accomplish the mission, the fuck are you doing? Um,
A great question.
okay, I mean, yes, I'm a PR professional in theory, but sometimes this is just this is beyond the pale. I have so many passages that are highlighted and underlined. Uh, this section, the review speaks a language that may seem familiar, but its foundations are pseudoscientific and subjective. For instance, unscientific evidence quality descriptors such as weak and poor were identified 21 times and 10 times, respectively. The review's reliance on such ambiguous terms leads readers to draw their own conclusions, which may not be scientifically informed. Such terms also undermine the rigor of the actual research, which presents much more nuanced findings than subjective descriptors convey. Now, this is something that we can sink our teeth into because words matter because they have definitions,
Yes.
both definitively and colloquially.
Yes. And I'm sure that in your experience as a public affairs officer, you had like you had to be very specific in what words you used and what words you didn't use.
Oh, yeah.
And so I would think that in a medical publication, you can't be subjective. Like that
Well,
goes against everything.
I mean, if you really think about it, the things that we do, and the subjects that we handle in the course of our professional duties, both past and present, we don't, nobody's lives have really hung in the balance.
It's true. It's true.
I mean, when when I was in the army, okay, yeah, I skirted some of those issues, but not that are going to directly affect the lives of children and the entire arc of their life, or God forbid, having it been cut short. And I know both you and I have both stressed about how do we say something to convey the message, accurately, succinctly. And here she is in a medical review playing fast and loose with the language.
For 400 pages.
I,
I just,
but I think that's one of the things is I think that's one of the ways in which the pro-trans um, advocates really mess up, is that we want everything to be in medical language. It has to be the most accurate, the most technical. And we forget that we're aiming our publications, we need to be aiming our publications not at necessarily the medical professional who are already mostly on our side, but to the, Mr. and
Parents.
Mrs., John or Jane Q public, because ultimately they're the people we need to convince. We don't have to convince, the vanguard of our own activists. We're
No,
not going to be able to convince the true believers for gender criticals and the JKRs,
no,
but there's like this massive cohort in the middle that we can make inroads with. And I think it's there that we're failing, because based on the language of the critique, the Cass Review knew who their primary audience was, and it wasn't the commissioning body.
no, no. It was the average parent in, one of the shires of the UK.
Mm-hmm.
Some one of the things that just gets hammered into our heads as communications professionals is to know
Mm-hmm.
your audience. It's so uh, looking at the cash review, I mean, it's very long. It is, but because it's using all of these subjective terms, it actually is going to read more comfortably to your average parent than, unfortunately, the critique, because the
Mm-hmm.
critique is very dense. It's like you said, it's just very legalese almost. Like it's just
Well,
it,
they're writing to the mission, which was to punch big gaping holes in the Cass Review. And to that end, they succeeded.
true. I agree with you 100% on that. It was packaged in a way that it might not be easily accessible to people who need to hear it. So then it's up to you, to the HuffPos and the People magazines to pull out the relevant bits.
And they're shitting the bed because they they don't have the staff and the resources to really translate what they're saying. All right, and just looking at the document and the things that I've highlighted, um, like in section 2, where where they talk about the Cass Review does not follow established standards for evaluating evidence and evidence quality. Down here, balance of benefits and harms. The review does not consider the harms of not offering gender affirming medical care to a young person with gender dysphoria.
I wanted to make sure we talked about this, so I'm glad we're getting here.
Oh, yeah, this one wasn't even highlighted. It was just red underline, because that was my path growing up. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, in the identity panel, we talked about what what the path was like before we even had all of this information. And you know it nearly cut short a 45-year run. And I am not a weak-willed person. You know, I fought gender dysphoria to, fought it to victory. I've survived, army basic training, three combat tours, an attempt on my own life. I'm not I'm not a person to easily give up. And to think that I was going to throw it all in because I thought I couldn't live in a body that I could call mine. And the fact that Yale points this out, and it's seemingly buried if you're not looking for something like that. They're not considering the harm to the patient. Isn't that basic? I mean, I'd
Do
love
no
to have a
harm.
doctor on
Right.
because it seems like that's a basic. Is the condition going to kill the patient? If yes, treat the fucking patient. Whether it's got, studied out the wazoo or not, treat the fucking patient.
One thing that I have noticed, and this is an excuse, it is not an excuse at all. And I think the NHS suffers from it worse than the US like healthcare system is like just think about how hard it is for you to see your own doctors right now. And it's difficult. And just think about how much those doctors don't speak to each other, how much that they are, if you're seeing a doctor for one condition, they're only thinking of that in like a little vacuum. They're only seeing that little piece of that of you. There's so few doctors, unfortunately, who have the time to consider the holistic person. And what you see in the Yale Critique is that they actually did bring together people, doctors from across endocrinology, psychiatry, who could together see a whole person. So again, not excusing these doctors, but if you go to your pediatrician with your child and you present some of these symptoms, they might not understand, but then they might also be seeing them in like a tiny, tiny piece, so they're not going to see the whole import.
And that's actually more valid than I really want to admit. Um, that also doesn't excuse the review
Mm-hmm.
from doing due diligence and putting forth, uh, pseudoscience as hard science. Uh, and one thing I really did appreciate about uh, the uh, the critique is they inserted commentary, but it was always in italics, so you could see where they're saying, like in the part just above what I read, evidence, certainty, and quality. The review does not describe the positive outcomes of gender affirming medical treatments for transgender youth, including improved body satisfaction, appearance congruence, quality of life, psychosocial functioning, and mental health, as well as reduced suicidality. And then in italics, it says, it is highly unusual for a document issuing clinical recommendations to not sufficiently describe the evidence on the effects of the treatment.
That was just written so dryly in the document, but like if you put the right intonation, it really is, like you said, just a bit of a bitch slap.
Well, I mean, and that's not the only place where uh they really took these people to task. Later on in that same section, I highlighted patient values and preferences. Their view does engage with transgender young people, but it often makes recommendations that conflict with their expressed values and preferences. The prevailing theme of the focus group with transgender youth is that they want improved access to appropriate gender affirming medical services from clinicians who have appropriate training and experience. They want their needs and concerns taken seriously. And then in italics, the review completely disregards the expressed values and preferences of a transgender youth in its most emphatic, recommendation, which is to limit care to research settings that do not yet exist.
Hmm.
That's pretty damning. Or, oh boy, this one's going to be bad. And I definitely want to talk about this one. The review conducted a series of focus group with healthcare workers of varying backgrounds, some of whom are not even clinicians. It is not clear what the expertise of these individuals might be in the field of transgender health. Of note, 34% stated that their understanding of, quote, gender questioning children and young people, end quote, came from the public discourse and the media. Further, 32% of respondents strongly agreed with the statement, quote, there is no such thing as a trans child, end quote. And then in italics, denying the existence of transgender people of any age is an invalid professional viewpoint. The involvement of those with such extreme viewpoints is a deeply concerning move for a document that issues recommendations on clinical care. Help me out.
There's so much. There's so much to pull from. Because I was just
kind of smorgasbord.
It really is. It just the denial of trans children, like, first of all, is the thing that sticks to me a lot. And I'm going back. I went back and again looked at the cash review. It looks so credible, inviting, like a thing that I would, like pick up and read, and maybe not in 400 pages, but it looks like a brochure you would see at your doctor's office. So I'm just, all of these buried little nuggets that are inside of it are just, it is a fruitcake of
That's a good way of putting it. It's a fruitcake.
It's a fruitcake.
And
of
they
bigotry.
never degrade. They never go away. They just they persist.
They persist. And they're very British. We'll go with that too. They are fruitcakes. So
some of my best friends, when I was discovering that I had gender dysphoria back when I was 5, were British. The Misters. Gods, I love those. I love those guys.
I'm a huge Anglophile, don't get me wrong, but it's interesting the way that everything is put together. And I really am. I am struck by this whole strongly agree that there is no such thing. Like, what the actual fuck?
Okay, let's kind of nudge her back on course. From a PR perspective, if your client brought you something that said that, and they were in the business of giving health care to transgender youth, what do you say? What are your professional thoughts?
Thank you for getting me out of where I was spiraling into there, because it's easy, and just going, okay, let's be PR practitioners here for a second. If my client handed me that, and it's so thoroughly went against their mission, I would have have to have one of those courageous conversations that are always so fun to have with clients, where you say, okay, these two things are fundamentally incompatible. I cannot, in good conscience, professionally, ethically, try to make these two things fit. Um, I just it's one of those situations though where I imagine if they did have someone in PR, and it doesn't, I mean, maybe they did, but if they had someone do any sort of like PR sniff test on this, someone should have flagged it. Just like someone should have been reading the original cash review and not only checking to make sure that it was laid out correctly and had correct punctuation, but also like checking to make sure it was structurally sound. Like that is not just good PR, but it's just good communication, good writing.
But from my perspective, when if if a commander would have presented something where he was making a tactical or strategic decision on information that was counter to the mission, that's a breach of ethics. It's a conflict of interest and presents incalculable reputational risk. Now, with a political body like the NHS, and I do believe that Dr. Cass was a political appointee, hang on, I got to check my emotions here. I think Dr. Cass is acting in a political manner because she is a political appointee, which I cannot fault her for. The unfortunate reality is that she's trying to straddle two very, very different worlds. She has the scientific component of creating a document to recommend clinical things that need to have the underpinnings of hard science, correct scientific method, research, the whole ball of wax. And she had an absolutely mountain of data on which to make these recommendations. She also had, I think, political marching orders because this was under the UK's Conservative Party, which was very much anti-transgender. I mean, they put a notable gender critical woman. I've forgotten her name. David Tennant went after her at some award show,
At the
and
BAFTAs?
I think
Because he was the
so.
host of the BAFTAs.
No, he was. David Tennant was getting an award
Oh, okay.
because for the advocacies that he did on behalf of his daughter. Is it his daughter or his son? I can't remember. But his child is trans, and so he became a very vocal trans advocate, and that ruffled a lot of others. And there was, I think it was Kemi something or other, and there was a big Twitter kerfluffle because Twitter's such a stable field of reasonable people.
So much.
But I digress. I think, but this anti-trans person was put in charge of administering healthcare to transgender youth. again, conflict of interest. And one thing that in reading the critique that I think that was really missing is any sort of notion about who paid the price. How many kids are not with us because their care was delayed? Because it's no secret that the suicidality rate is high.
Yeah.
Some people have said that it's higher than HIV and cancer combined.
That's mind-boggling.
Yeah. But we've come to about 45 minutes, an hour into our conversation. I want to pause it here, give everybody a coffee and tea break. I'm going to go get something to decongest my nose because it's starting to become annoying. We'll take 10 and be
Okay.
back.
All right.
So during the break, you mentioned something about the reviews fixation.
I mean, first of all, the usage of the word fixation in this sentence in a legal publication with a medical core, it's just great. First of all, it's just like it does a lot of work. So the review's fixation on high quality evidence is inappropriate. Emphasis is mine. Um,
But
but
is it really?
I mean, the whole thing's in italics, so probably not. The rest of this paragraph has a lot of like quotation marks, like high quality evidence. Um, so what I've thought was interesting about this section is there's two parts. I'm gonna take it as there's the communication side of just this whole paragraph about high quality evidence and how they can't separate it from I guess they have certain systems in the UK that they use to measure their evidence in medicine. So all of that's a big deal because the way I boiled down this paragraph was essentially like um they're trying to make it sound like things are in need of this high quality evidence, but really it's you shouldn't even be using this to decide. Like high quality is like it's like calling something um organic, I guess. Like
the
it has meaning, but does it have meaning?
the thing that's just that when you say that, the thing that comes to my mind is military grade.
Okay, tell me more.
So military grade is like the biggest oxymoron you could ever imagine.
Okay.
I mean, there are some weapon systems that are, I mean, the equipment is good enough.
Mm-hmm.
However, comma, if
Mm-hmm.
someone tells you that something is military grade, they're selling you horseshit. I literally had a pair of issued combat boots that when you looked at the label on the inside of the boot, it said, not meant for combat.
No,
Yes.
that's a real truth in advertising issue. Like,
And it was specifically purchased by the Army for issue to a deploying soldier, and it wasn't meant for combat.
so what are they for? Like, I just have questions here. I know, I know. I don't want to digress too far.
But that's, I mean, and I think that's really illustrative of what's going on here if the Yale Critique is saying nothing else is pinned, like, like you would affix rotor blades on a helicopter to the central hub, to this high quality evidence when nothing else is, and they're still getting good outcomes because we don't have, giant swaths of dead children, which genuinely does scare me.
Yeah.
And they're saying, well, there's not enough high quality evidence. Well, what are, what are we doing? Like, how can you convey, I mean, the high quality evidence or the lack thereof, I think becomes its own buzzword. And the more I think about this critique, the more I realize that the Cass review is a dog whistle in academic clothing.
100%. 100%.
And I think, and for me to make that, that is a huge leap for someone who is A, not an academic, B, not a medical professional. But the points that the Yale review is bringing, and they brought receipts, like there's footnotes for every page.
Oh, just half the page footnotes.
Yeah. And, when they make an accusation, like the section after, or actually within that paragraph that you were referencing, I had underlined, in any area of medicine, the presence or absence of high quality evidence, quote unquote,
Yep.
alone should not be used to decide whether to offer treatment that has been shown to be beneficial, and care in any area of medicine should not be stopped while awaiting specific study designs. They're delaying,
It's a stall tactic.
yes. And so let me insert myself. I need to step out of the professional role to say this. When I, as Aquila, see this, it says to me, we are delaying care deliberately so that we can identify and target you specifically down the road. Because once your skeleton is locked in place, you can't change that. Hip structure, shoulder structure, elbow structure, femur structure, all of that is fixed.
Then you're trapped.
Trapped and identifiable, either by medical records or visually. They're pinning targets on trans people because they can.
Do you think it's that malicious?
Not at this scale. I do believe that Dr. Cass has certain ideologies. Her team certainly had them. Her superiors certainly had them.
Mm-hmm.
Whether this was meant to target well, by design, because they're delaying trans people's healthcare, it was definitely targeted at a specific audience. Now, the motives behind that are nebulous. Was it malicious? I don't know. Does it feel malicious? Yeah, it does. And the net the net effect is still the same, that trans people are more identifiable when they've locked in a skeletal structure and other secondary sex characteristics that are of one phenotype or another.
Can we explore this a little bit more? Can I just ask questions as a
Oh,
curious person, curious, like
yeah.
I guess like are is it shown that do we have enough examples, studies, whatever, of children who got gender affirming care, got to pause puberty, for instance, and do so that they I'm going to use all of the wrong words here, so I'm going to not.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
But essentially like take all the hormones that they need so that they can so their body matches the identity, their
Mm-hmm.
identity. Um what does that longitudinally look like? Like what does that look like when they
There are
become
ongoing
2020?
studies.
Okay.
Um, I think they mentioned them uh, in the critique, but I don't know them off the top of my head. The detransition rate globally is around 1%. In the US, it's just shy of 14%. And a lot of people who stop transitioning or detransition do so because of external factors such as loss of job, instability, other legal issues, family, threat envelopes, that sort of thing. And so if you're excluding external factors, you're probably looking at a 1 to 2% regret rate, which is far lower than most medical procedures.
And I was also thinking about it like on the physical side, the idea of getting the care to prevent your skeleton from being locked in to a
Mm-hmm.
particular like how is it definably different? Does that make sense? Like am I asking the right question?
Well, the skeletal structure between men and women.
Well, yeah, no, I understand that that is different, but I mean if you do the drugs work in a way that if you take them as a child at whatever age and you continue taking them, does that halt or like keep you from having like broader shoulders, for instance,
Okay,
or
so if you
yeah,
pause puberty, that's what it does. It pauses puberty.
uh-huh,
You can't do pausing puberty alone because nothing happens.
right. So something else has to happen. So you're taking the
So
hormones
you
too,
have to
right?
so you have to pause puberty to
Uh-huh.
keep the changes from happening. Then you insert, gender affirming hormone therapy
Mm-hmm.
to give them the puberty that of their target gender. And some people don't always go all the way. So if someone who has an ideal body end state body, it's like I want these changes, they take, like, let's just say if I was a teen and I don't want, I want a mostly female skeleton, but I don't want to like go exclusively through a female puberty. The doctors can give me hormones, or set up the regimen so that there's a balance. And that's part of the relationship between the caregiver and the patient. Mm, that feels good.
Good.
Um, so like me, I would have, I met a trans woman who went through her target puberty and she was like 5'1". I would have been completely happy. Um, I don't think I would have survived, but that's that's a different conversation that we can have at a later date. But yeah, there's very little in dissatisfaction. It
Mhm.
does happen because people are people. Um, I was actually watching an interview with somebody who had detransitioned, and they detransitioned because they didn't think it was right. They they had the experience. They don't regret it. They just, it's like, no, I liked my life better how it was. They changed as a person, so they opted to detransition. And they were
Interesting.
female to she was female to male to female.
Well, I really think that this seeming uh off-topic section, though, does kind of go back to one of the PR benefits of the Yale Critique, which is helping to educate and even if it is absolutely not written for a layperson, even if it is um long and dense, it still can still serve as the basis as a reference for other other communications that um actually say the correct things, accurate things, rather
Yeah,
than just the shiny CAS report.
yeah. And I think one of the really interesting things that was underneath that whole high quality evidence thing,
Mm-hmm.
they talk about studies for gender affirming healthcare being, and the some of the ethical and scientific problems. And one of them is one of my own personal pet issues, coercion.
Right.
So one of the bullets under that was coercion occurs when research participation is one of the only ways to obtain a much needed treatment. A randomized control trial model to assess whether to give medically affirming interventions to youth with gender dysphoria may appeal to those who cannot obtain affirming interventions another way. Per international regulations on medical and scientific ethics, coercion, even when unintended, must be avoided in study design. Restricting all care to a research setting, as recent UK rules have done based on the review, is coercive and unethical. And I apologize for not noting the italics. Um, the restricting all care to a research setting, as a recent UK rules have done based on the review, is coercive and unethical, was in italics.
Yes. I really like the way that they did that. It's formatting is everything.
Formatting is very important, and they did an excellent job um, at doing this.
Yes.
Uh, now, now the review, the critique did note that there were some good points, and one of them I have highlight is the review expresses an appropriate desire to see longer, larger studies on the impacts of gender affirming medical treatment, and this aligns with leading organizations' views. The review's desire to see only high quality evidence dominate this field, however, is not realistic or appropriate. Then italics, because no other area of pediatrics is held to the same is held to this standard. End of italics.
Right.
I,
Just, I just, the way I read that was very much like, because no other area pediatrics is held to the standard. Like,
Not
what?
just me. Okay.
Yeah. Like, no, it's again, the use of italics in this document,
Was so on point.
it really was. It gives me life. It's I don't know. They go on for a while about how high quality evidence. And I, I agree, it's a complete dog whistle there. Um,
Well,
so you said you look like you're about to say something.
I got to take my PR hat off again.
Okay.
As someone who accesses gender affirming care, um, this feels like, a really complicated chess move to maintain control of the board. There, it seems like this is that the cast review is designed to delay, deflect. In essence, it's a cover up to make sure that people can be identified, can be strung along. I mean, this is snake oil salesman. It's like, we're gonna offer you, we're gonna string you along, but you have to jump through all of these hoops and then wait in line. Hurry up and wait. Hurry up and wait. Hurry up and wait.
By the time your number comes up, you've already gone through puberty. And then where are you?
Yeah. And the Yale Critique makes that exact point. The quest for longer and more data is never ending, but when the answers are only partially available, patients cannot wait for care.
No. I mean, this isn't to the level of this child needs a heart transplant
Yeah,
tomorrow. However, it is still, there is a time limit.
but and here's another instance where I have to sort of insert a personal comment. One thing that I noticed, that even though I've already been through puberty on the male side, there is still a feeling of adjusting to new emotional realities in, as someone in their mid to late 40s. I mean, I turned 49 this year, and I still have some of the emotional realities of what I imagine being a teenage girl is. It's fucking scary. And I would not want to put someone through, excuse me, puberty twice over if I don't have to. That shit sucks.
I mean, that was the other thing as I was reading up on this, it's just puberty is just a messed up time for anyone and everyone. And then when you add like gender dysphoria on top of that, I can't imagine. Because
It's not
being
fun.
like being a 12-year-old girl, like everything is big and like just affecting you in deeply personal ways, and then you don't understand what your body is doing, it looks like, and it's never good enough because of the standards that society puts on what your body should look like. So like having all of that, but then having to do it again, or having to do it in like a way you didn't want to, like that sucks. And the other thing that I don't know if the cash review does go into any detail, short of actual surgery, it's all reversible, is it not? Like you stop taking the meds and
Well, things like breast development are
Mhm.
reversible surgically.
Surgically.
Some you can't undo bone growth.
Okay.
And like I've been on the estrogen for 4 years. This, if I don't actively try to reshape my voice, this is what I sound like. My pharynx will never shrink. Now, if I gave you testosterone, yours would grow
Hmm.
to a certain extent.
Okay.
But yeah, those don't some of those things don't undo with medication changes. Because this is going to sound really messed up, but as of my last labs, menopausal women have generally more testosterone than I do.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I was actually going to say something about menopause earlier, but you read my mind. So,
Um, Doctors used to uh, force trans women into menopause. Yeah.
why? Why? That's terrible.
I don't know.
I know just what I have seen from other women, but it doesn't like, why would you do that to someone?
I,
Why?
I don't know. I got little glimpses of uh, menopause when I first started transitioning. I have a whole new respect. Like, and PMS, my dudes, that shit is for fucking real. One day I was having a great day, had a blast. The only thing that was off was I had run out of progesterone, and it was the night before an estrogen dose, so both were basically zeroed out. Had a great day, was feeling energetic, laid down to bed. All of a sudden, I'm bawling my eyes out for absolutely no fucking reason. Like what the fuck happened? And I cried for like 2 hours.
Yeah.
Like what the hell? Just and then the next day, you know, I acclimated to the new reality and I was okay. But like that inflection point was hell on earth.
Yes. It's true. Sorry, I'm just laughing because it's so
No, it's okay
relatable.
to laugh. I mean, it's
It's
fucking
so
funny.
relatable. Like when I was pregnant, I just they were just commercials I couldn't watch because they made me cry.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
It's like you just like emotions are interesting. And yeah, I don't know why they would do that to trans women. Like
And
that's rude.
and another like reality was, you know, falling in love as a 48-year-old teenage girl. I'm just no.
Oh,
That was
oh shit.
yeah, and it was over and done with. I mean, it looking back, it followed teenage patterns, and I'm decidedly not.
A teenager?
Well, I mean, hormonally I am, but what
I
the fuck?
it's just I having discussed your love life previously, and I just put all of the things together, right, in the context of this conversation and just realized like I just had a flashback to teenage me. And then I was like, oh, I get it. Well, I mean, it's been like 30 years. So
But the
I
thing is,
forgot.
I get it. I, there's that moment of understanding. And I think the thing that the cast review misses is the golden opportunity, particularly for those who transition later in life,
Mm-hmm.
to have the context of living on both sides of the gender line. That is an untapped resource of information and context. And we are throwing it away. I bring up the whole, I like harping on this one incident that I had on Reddit where I was having an exchange with a trans man. He was 16, trans boy. We'll say that.
Okay.
And even after saying that I transitioned at the tender age of 45, this cat comes in, oh, you don't, and says to me, you don't know what it's like to live as a man.
I'm sorry. Okay. Go on.
And of course, I shut him down. I'm like, the fuck? But to be able to see things from a very intimate perspective of, changing your life over, changing your wardrobe, learning how to do makeup, um, learning how to style hair, learning new uh, patterns of speaking, walking, retooling your entire life to fit the box. And I can't say that without thinking about Pinhead, but that's Rabbit Trail. The box. You opened it, we came. Doug Bradley is such a treasure. Um, but we're missing out when we play fuck games like what the cast review is doing. We're forcing people to live lives that they don't want,
Right.
so that fossilized people who don't have the best interests of the patient can feel good about themselves.
Exactly.
And I think that's the fundamental ethical problem of not rendering gender affirming care, is that we're forcing our values onto someone else that doesn't live by them. And that was the great point that they made in talking about, the coercion. We're coercing people to participate in study, or they're trying to coerce people to participate in study. And if it's a randomized control trial, they may not get the gender affirming care that they're looking for because it's a randomized control trial. And
Right.
if you're taking a placebo, you progress along it'll never be a double blind study, because you'll be able to see and feel the realities. I mean,
Yeah.
if a trans girl gets into that trial and she gets hormones, well, evidence of titties, uh, that's a dead giveaway.
Yeah.
And so would be the lack thereof.
Yeah.
And the reverse for a trans boy.
Mm-hmm.
And think about the kind of psychological damage that a young person who places their trust in a medical professional and medical institution can you conceive of the disappointment of jumping through all the hoops to get into this study and then you get shortchanged?
That's a public relations nightmare.
And I think that's really where the reputational damage would start to spiral out of control, because you've got not only, marketing issues, because you have to reach out to the intended audience, their parents.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're not just lying to a kid,
Which is shitty already.
you're lying to their parents.
Who vote, who are members of the community.
But can bring lawsuit. I
Also
mean,
that.
if you're violating ethics, I don't think sovereign immunity applies. But that's a question for a lawyer,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah. I was like, I
Um,
don't know.
but when you're fundamentally engaging in unethical practices, now organizations like the alphabet agencies, the CIA, the NSA, their world by definition is nebulous at best. But when you're dealing with organizations like the National Institute for Health in the United States, or the National Health Services in the UK, people expect some baseline level of ethics out of your office.
Well, yes.
And if you're not, then your data falls apart, because, as the critique states, people aren't going to stay in it. So the fewer people that stay in it, you don't have that kind of high quality data that you're looking for.
Right.
And just, for me, it was the ethical dilemmas that the Yale review, or the Yale critique, um really brought into sharp focus for me. Yeah, I'm just scrolling through the where they misrepresented their own data about the the data about the number of patients seeking gender affirming care, where there's an entire period of like 2 years where they could have conceivably double counted uh the number of referrals. And oh, wait a second. Okay. So figure 2, and I'll throw up a screen cap of this uh, into the video. Figure 2 shows a graph plotting total referred adolescents against an estimation of the total population of transgender youth in the UK. One thing is abundantly clear: the gap between youth who may benefit from the care and those who receive even the first opportunity to consider this care is astronomical. The review is overly concerned with overtreating this population, but the data are clear that the transgender youth in the UK are vastly underserved, just as they are throughout the world. And before that, I really should have read the whole page, because it's short because of the graphic. The review's referral data demonstrate one objective fact: most transgender adolescents in the UK are not referred for care. There are likely about 44,000 transgender adolescents in the UK based on 2021 census data. For every year people age into and out of this figure, with 3,585 referrals reported as in 2021 and less in years prior, we can safely assume that less than 10% of all youth who may benefit from care have received any opportunity to do so.
That is a devastating statistic. Like, I wonder if only 10% of adolescents are referred, what is happening to that other 90%? Are they being shut down? Are they um are they being shut down by their parents? Are they being shut down by their doctors? Are they being stuck in a limbo of calling their provider 200 times?
Likely in an organization as large as the National Health Service. My guess, and it is only a guess, is that they're just stuck in bureaucratic nowhere. That's the reality of, I mean, shit. Think about the VA.
I was just thinking, yeah. There's no good answer, unfortunately. And I wish there
No,
was.
no. And the thing that keeps coming up over and over and over again is that the cast review was dodging the data that was right in front of them. I mean, okay. If I were working for the cast review in an honest capacity, acknowledge the data, acknowledge that, you know, the shortcomings, and state the real truth. There's not enough funding to provide the care that's expected. Is it the best answer? No. Is it going to hurt people? Yes. It is still the truth. And people, I think the people that are on the receiving end of this, granted, the bureaucratic realities of just hard bean counting is devastating.
True.
But ultimately, the truth is something that they can deal with and adjust fire from. But when you don't even have a grasp on what the objective reality is, there's no hope of trying to adjust for that.
I there are 2 points that I want to touch on because it's the sad state of our legal system. So, um, so this idea that the bans on gender affirming care have been justified, and there's this idea that according to Poe versus Labrador, so Poe versus Labrador, the Attorney General of Idaho says, for reasons no one knows, gender dysphoria has grown exponentially among young people. I want to take that apart for a second because I
Hit me.
do what?
Hit me. Let's do it.
Well, it's just this asserts that that this is new, that this has not existed for generations. And it's just this idea of the older generations just shutting things down that they don't want to believe exist, that fall outside of their established worldview. Gender dysphoria is not new. We just have a name for it. We have shown a light on what it looks like and what it means. So it hasn't grown exponentially. We just know what it looks like now.
I'm I'm going to put myself in a position that I normally would not. I want to try my best to see it from their perspective.
Okay.
So not everyone can have the amount of academic context that we find in the people that wrote this this critique.
Yeah.
For most people, gender and sex are
Synonymous.
interchangeable words,
Yeah.
interchangeable concepts,
Yeah.
and they only come in two varieties. And there's very, very rarely someone who has defined medical conditions that fit intersex, but those can be diagnosed by a medical professional and have been noted for years, for long periods of time.
Yeah.
And in the background, there are documents like the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the DSM.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about it, like in when I first tried to transition, it was 1995. The DSM-4 had only been out for a single year. And it had gone from transsexualism, which was a no, I want to say it fell under the category of paraphilia. So it was in a class of disorders like, being, for dating on children, to gender identity disorder. And it was gender identity disorder. It was still disordered thinking. It was a pathology from 1994 to 2013. That's what, 20 years thereabouts.
Yeah, pretty much, give or take.
So, and then all of a sudden, it went from gender identity disorder, which was a pathology, to being in the same class as depression.
Quite the shift.
All within a 20-year time span.
That is within many people's transitional lifetimes.
And if we zoom out even further, so many of these people were born, the people that are really going after these laws, many of them are born in the 1950s, late 40s, early 50s, the baby boomers.
Yeah.
So think about the prevailing technology for them at the time that they established themselves as people. Radio, print, television was still a new technology that people were acclimating to.
True.
We're Gen X.
I'm technically a millennial.
Okay. For the purpose of this argument, we'll adopt you.
Okay.
So you've got the prevailing technology when we were kids, television, radio, you had some video like VHS, Betamax.
Mm-hmm. Set tapes.
Yep. And think about the amount of change that we've seen
Mm-hmm.
simply in our lifetime.
Yeah.
We've gone from rotary dial phones to
Today's.
a device that fits in your pocket that
Yeah.
can essentially access the entire knowledge of humankind.
Right.
And that's happened in the last 40 years.
Yeah.
And how much of that change has happened in the last 20, the last 10?
Mm-hmm.
At what point does the human mind reach an inelastic point?
Is it inelasticity or a lack of openness?
I think it's both.
Okay.
I think that the demands on people to change and acclimate to new realities is stressing people to the point where they simply say, no more. It's not right. Let me categorically say it is not right. I am saying I understand to a certain point. If you are unable or unwilling to adapt, you need to step out of a leadership position because that is what is required.
I want to say a thing. It's going to take us to a whole different place, but I'm going to say it and
Say it.
we're going to I have been thinking for at least the last 3 weeks, probably longer, but it has become very clear in the last 3 weeks that if we're going to have minimum ages to hold elected office, we should also have maximum ages to hold elected.
Yep.
This is not a new idea. I'm just
And I
like,
will put a pin in that and we can talk about it on another stream. I do want to kind of get back
yeah, no, I
to,
was like, we're just going to say it
oh, yeah.
because it is very
Um,
relevant right there.
so I want to ask this
Okay.
for you as a parent.
Okay.
What was the scariest thing that you read in this critique?
There were a few things. I think that the one that broke my heart the most was this idea that tens of thousands of British children were not getting the appropriate care. And then, like, just the mental health aspects of that. Like, watching my child just struggle sometimes with emotions um that are perfectly normal for their age. I could it breaks my heart to imagine that there are children out there who are adding on to that with feeling like they can't be who they truly are. So for me as a parent, that is what affected me the most.
And as a PR professional, what caused you the most professional alarm?
Um, I as a PR professional, I mean, we talked about it earlier. It's this, I have a hard time when I can read something or see something and see that it is not internally consistent. And in my professional life, that is also something that bothers me. When you say a thing, but then do another thing. When those things do not align, that fundamentally bothers me. So, reading about what the cast review said, the way that they misrepresented data, like that is all just a mess from a communications perspective. And here's the thing, it's not like, I mean, it's out there in the world now. It is out there in the world as a document that exists that looks like it is real, and it can be cited for um for judicial reasons, for legislative reasons, for, just your doctor can pull it up and spout things off to you. So it's done all of this damage already, and you can't reel it back. The Yale Critique does what it can, but it I don't know how much amplification it's getting.
Yeah. No, I think you're very on point. I think for me personally, because I do have a little bit of a background in hard sciences, when I was a college freshman and sophomore, I was a physics major. And I was raised in a household where the scientific method was fundamental to how me and my brother were raised.
Mm-hmm.
And to see that a trusted institution flouted those principles so flagrantly
Mm-hmm.
is personally upsetting. Um, as someone who's done crisis communications in the wild, um, if I saw this, I would be spinning up all the machinery because we were about to take major hits.
Mm-hmm.
Um, thankfully, I think since this was a political job and was run by a political appointee, there would be a distinct fall person. But the the ethical concerns that the Yale critique brings up with regards to the systemic reviews and everything else, I think that is what that's what would be causing me the most consternation. But there was one passage that I really wanted to end this on. Any discussion of social contagion naturally leads to what does shape gender identity. Gender identity has strong biological underpinnings that do not completely overlap with sex assigned at birth. In the truest scientific sense, gender and sex are multidimensional concepts with complex expressions that are related and distinct from each other in ways that modern science is still exploring. What we do know is that gender identity is real for transgender people as it is for cisgender people. Drawing on outdated and biased notions that being transgender is a pathological condition, however, the review still attempts to find additional explanations for the cause of being transgender. It circumvents the known science by drawing a flawed parallel between gender diversity and cancer. And they had a poll quote. Quote, Expressions of being human vary greatly in how much biological versus psychological versus social environment uh, causes contribute. As an unregulated but illustrative example to help explain this, people who carry the BRCA gene, I think it's pronounced BRCA,
Mhm.
have a high genetic risk of breast cancer, whereas those without the BRCA gene and with no family history factors like smoking, obesity, and lack of exercise play a much greater part. In other words, the end result is the same, but the causes are different. Page 117. It goes on to say, many would contest the assertion that that breast cancer is an expression of being human. Others might balk at using an example of disease to describe gender, which is a natural aspect of human life. But moreover, this is an oversimplification. Many people do develop breast cancer with no known genetic cause, but just because that cause is not known does not mean that it does not exist. Investigations into the genetic causes of breast or any other cancer are far from done, and there are many other genes besides the BRCA1 and 2 that are implicated in the development of breast cancer. This example does not cast doubt on the role that biology plays in shaping gender. Most concerningly, its serious lack of scientific rigor should lead readers to question what position the review is operating from. Is it science or is it speculation?
Hmm.
This was a challenging read, not only for the the density of the material, but just seeing how much disregard for children an institution can have. I am
Yeah,
familiar with institutional disregard, from the military,
right.
and to see it so on display was disheartening. What did you find most challenging about reading this, besides the just the words on the page?
Besides the density and the amount of citations, when it comes to the actual content, it was just again this idea that something so flawed, something so inaccurate has been raised up as truth. Like, and I mean, I'm just thinking about it again. It calls itself an evidence-based critique, and they lived up to that promise because they have, hold please, what is that a one? 104 footnotes for a 39-page document. So,
That's roughly 3 per page.
yeah, yeah. I mean, so I applaud them for this. Yeah, it's just it's disheartening to know that this was commissioned, that the cast review was commissioned, and then people were like, "Great job, you did it. You spent 400 pages, um, basically saying that all of this was uh, that gender affirming care was is unnecessary and rushed and um not beneficial."
Mhm.
And then they wrap it up in a look, but we care about children.
Think of the children.
Think of the children. Um,
Ah, Christine, thank you, thank you, thank you so much. for the gift of your time. For you people out in YouTube land, thank you for the gift of yours. Be safe, be well, take charge.